So what you're listening to is Neon Chronicles, my brand new patch library for the Roland D-50 from 1987. What you're looking at is a Roland PG-1000. This is the programmer you would use to program the D-50, which is hooked up right here, just off camera. And tonight, we're going to be checking out all of the sounds in Neon Chronicles, so you guys can hear what that's like, as well as pull some of them apart that I haven't shown on stream or something like that. Some of the programming tips and techniques you can use to make your own sounds. And it goes without saying that the D-50, these sounds work on the hardware D-50 version. So that's the vintage keyboard, the rack mount D-550, the Roland V-Synth XT with the D-50 modification or card, the D-05 Boutique, and of course the Roland Cloud and VST versions of the Roland D-50 will load these sounds too. So just because you don't have a vintage D-50, if you have the Roland Cloud, you can use these sounds as well. And the link to these sounds is in the description. I'll probably pin a comment as well. So welcome to the stream, everybody. Welcome to the stream, Mark. James, you caught the reference. I love that. Remind me to send you something for free. Let's make sure that the microphone's working. It's giving me some issues. So anyways, let's play a couple more sounds and then we'll actually pull apart what we've got here. So this first sound, when you turn on or load Neon Chronicles into a D-50, this is what you're going to hear. What's so great, wow, you could hear that incredible reverse gated reverb. Sounds huge. And then it's gone like that. So that was a part of the way that I created this sound. And I think it's a unique one. There was so many cool sounds that the D-50 was able to make, and it was hard to pick one, but I felt for me, this one in particular was a good intro to the sound bank. So why don't we check out some of what's going on here. The real quick way, if you haven't watched any of my tutorials, by the way, in the link in the description as well, there's a link to a playlist with all of my tutorials on how you can make your own Roland D-50 sounds. But the real quick thing you can do is go to partial select here, and there's a trick that I'm blanking on as far as, what is it, previous value? There we go. So this partial mute button here, that took me a split second there. If I hold that down, I can mute the different partials. So if I mute the second partials from the sound, or it seems like maybe if I mute the upper layer, you can hear that we have just a piano sample. And the problem with a piano sample or any sample in the Roland D-50 is the samples are incredibly short. This was 1987. It's amazing what they were able to do in 87 to create all of these unique sounds. But this piano sound, by the time we get above that note, you'll notice that down here it's really quiet. And what's going on is I'm using bias. So bias is one of those concepts that isn't used in every synthesizer. So some people have trouble with it. If you imagine this is your keyboard, right? Since you guys can see this easier on screen. Bias essentially lets you pick a point and adjust a parameter, positive or negative, from that point. So it's a lot like key tracking, if you're familiar with that, when it comes to your filter. So the higher up on the keys you go, the brighter the filter gets. But the difference is key tracking is linear from left to right, whereas with bias, we can have it be neutral and then go positive or negative from a given point. And so what's super useful about that is in the case of this piano sound, once it got above a certain octave range, once we're up here, it sounds like dog shit. So I didn't want to have it, so I used bias to fade it out. So technically, if I play the highest note, you're not going to hear anything at all. I mean, it's a cool sound, but for having those like big badass chords, I wanted to be able to have that there. Matt, welcome to the stream. How's it going, my friend? Yes. And then so we have these other layers. So these are partials, the upper partials. You can see that these partials are unmuted now because they're flashing. Now we have a sort of Vangelis type thing. But what's happening is we have a reverse saw that's being sent, reverse saw LFO, sorry, being sent to the filter. So we have a sort of pulsing thing. And I would like you to notice too that we're using the 6-stage envelope. So we have more stages to play with. And that's really great because we can kind of have the sustain stage of the synthesizer not be quite as static. So it opens all the way up and then closes. The LFO's affecting the filter, and then the second sort of sustain part of the filter opens up slightly, so you get so it continues to open up, as well as I'm using aftertouch on the filter. And beyond that, I'm also using a aftertouch to increase the amount of vibrato on one of the partials. And so what that's doing is creating additional detune as well as opening the filter. So you can hear that that's quite an extreme amount of vibrato, but in this case, because you're only using it for aftertouch, it's actually pretty useful. James says, my D-50 often gets quieter the lower I play. Never could figure it out. Yes, bias. So we've got bias for the amplifier. This is the amplifier section of the PG-1000, and we also have bias for the filter, so you can use it on either or both, which is super useful. Matt Wright says, the 6-stage envelope generator is over my head. It's on some of the 80s and 90s. Korgs could never figure it out. Yeah, the DW8000 has the same 6-stage envelope. Or I shouldn't say the same. The thing I don't like about 6-stage envelopes is they're not as standardized. So we all know attack, decay, sustain, release, and it's the same on every synthesizer, essentially. 6-stage envelopes can be different. For instance, on the Ensoniq SQ80, the first stage can be a time or a delay parameter. And so things like that make it harder to have an intuitive sense about what's going on with those envelopes. But it's easy to learn what they do, though. You can get used to it. Trinity, too. I didn't realize that, Matt. So let's go ahead and jump into another sound. Let's go. This is one of my favorite sounds I made. This is called Across the Abyss, and I was inspired by Akira Yamaoka. So what's going on with this sound? Well, this is actually using a bunch of different partials to create this chord. So I'm going to go ahead and unpartial mute everybody, or mute everybody except for this far left one. I'm leaving that on just so you can see it, but what this button means is that I'm affecting only the lowest partial. So you can hear it's actually a loop. Right? If I add the second partial, I believe that's the fifth. If I add the next partial, now we have a minor chord. Now something, I'll have to unmute these or mute these partials again. Something about the way the D-50's loops and partials work is unlike something like the Wave Station, which came out 3 years later. The partials on the D-50, the loops are sort of like samples on another synthesizer where they will be longer or shorter depending on where you play on the keyboard, which is fine for octaves. So if I play something in octaves, it'll be in time with itself. And any sort of time variation you're hearing is actually just the delay. But if I play something that's not an octave, you'll notice that things get out of whack pretty quick. And that's because this is playing twice as fast, or 4 times as fast as down here. Right. So, Mark asks, is that like the layers on the JD800? Yes, it's the exact same thing as the layers on the JD800. In fact, almost everything I'm going to tell you about the D-50 will apply as well. Dubstation mentions that the SQ80 envelope can go negative in the first stage, which is super cool and unique. Yeah, the SQ80's envelopes are extremely flexible, and you can send positive or negative amounts around, which you don't always have the option to do here. You do with the pitch envelope. You can send negative pitch. Yeah. Alan says it's very cool. Sounds like a ghoul haunting a harp. Yes. PC, welcome to the stream. Glad to catch you. Vanessa, welcome. How's it going? So anyways, we'll keep moving through some of these sounds. I bet a lot of people would like to just hear what's going on with these. So one of my favorite sounds we did live on this stream is actually Big Grime bass. So shout outs to Big Grime. And it's just awesome. Something I almost never do with the D-50, which makes me a heretic, is I don't really mess with the joystick, but we can actually, I have it set so you could, I believe we can hear just the synth layer. And then if you move it all the way down, you can hear what's going on with the attack sample I'm using, which is adding that really wonderful, gritty industrial. And again, we're using the gated reverbs. I love the gated reverse reverbs in the Roland D-50. Weirdly, the D-50's like big reverbs that I thought would be amazing because of patches like Fantasia and Soundtrack, they're a little metallic sounding, and I like using some of these weirder ones more often. So anyways, moving back over here, we're moving on to a really cool patch called Jan Hammer's DX7. Something like that. And again, we're using... Lost the microphone for a second here. Let's try that. Come on, baby. Give it to me. Okay. Okay. Hopefully that's okay. Cool. But we're using a couple of different layers, the PCM and the synthesizer layer. So if I just hold a chord, you can hear we can use aftertouch. But I love that little glint. So let's see if we can isolate that. So we're going to only listen to the second layers. So you can hear this is the synthesizer aspect. And so many classic Roland D-50 sounds are based off of using a synthesis layer or two and then also some samples. And this just sounds great. I'm going to turn off by going to Common Select and Reverb Balance and turn that all the way off so we can just hear the synth dry. And you can hear that I'm using Pulse Width Mod on the square wave, and it just sounds great. One of the things that's crazy to me is how wonderful the D-50's virtual analog sounds, because almost no other synthesizer, including its successor, the JD800, has this level and character of virtual analog. It's just really unique, and I feel like after this, virtual analog both got better and worse in a weird way. I don't know if that makes sense, but there were so many synths that came out that either had like non-resonant digital filters in them. I'm thinking of the Insonic VFX and the Korg Wavestation, the original, and then they got resonant, but in that really plasticky sort of way, like the JP8000, which isn't to my personal liking, although a lot of people love that synth. Welcome to the stream, Ingolf. And the thing is, with this synth, I just think the way the waves sound is And it can be so expressive and dynamic. And one thing is, I'd love to release Neon Chronicles as, you know, a sample pack or something, but there's really no way to do it because you need the D-50's aftertouch and velocity sensitivity. It's very touch sensitive, and it's a beautiful thing. Anyways, let's check out the other partials here. So we're going to just leave these two unmuted, and now we can hear the sample. And you can hear what a dinky little terrible... and how you basically lose everything towards the top. Whenever I hear the samples of the D-50, I always think it reminds me a lot of like a Casio, sort of lo-fi, 8-bit, gritty, like not particularly impressive. But there's something about when you add some reverb, and in this case, the one I'm using, that reverse reverb again. All of a sudden it becomes a really interesting, gorgeous sound. And if we unmute the other partials, then we end up with the notes. Just one of my favorite sounds. I wanted to make sure I put it at the front of the pack so everybody could hear it. Walter says Korg took a while to put resonance on its filter. So did a lot of companies, actually. Mark asks, can you put your own samples in there? I know it's just a clip, but a thought. I don't have one yet. Can you put your own samples to use in the D-50? No, you can't. So you've got 100 samples, which is actually more like 70 something plus some loops. And that's what you get with the D-50, for better or worse. One thing the D-50 doesn't do as well as some other synths from this era is actually the breathy, vocally type stuff. You can check out some of the other videos. I've got the playlist has gotten pretty huge at this point of all of the live stream tutorials and the 3-hour tutorial masterclass I did on the D-50. But there really isn't a great like vocal sample in here. I do have one later on. We'll jump ahead and just try and find that real quick. Here we go. This is the best I could do to get a cool choir-y type sound, and it's pretty cool and kind of a little spooky. Patch 67, the Siren Choir. Yes. Dubstation, that's a good question. I actually don't think so. So definitely on the JD800, you could load in samples, but I think on the D-50, you're stuck with what you've got. I could be wrong. I should know that off the top of my head. But you've got a memory card, and I think that's kind of it. It could have been that they could store some samples on there. I actually don't know. I have some old D-50 memory cards, but I don't really know how I'd figure out, unless I don't recognize a sound source, I suppose, would be the way I would figure that out. The reason I say this is the JD800 has two separate card slots, one for samples and one for patches. So if you were to load that in, I'm just going kind of off of, because they have similar architecture, I'm assuming because this only has a slot for memory, that's the only way to do it. And I'm not aware of any way of loading samples in the manual via SysX or anything like that. So anyways, going back to the beginning here, we get to another one of my favorite sounds. This one's called God of the Wired. Shoutouts if you catch the reference here. This one's so good. just awesome. I need to intoxicate. Cheers to everybody out there in the chat tonight for hanging out. This is a lot of fun. And like I said, motherfucking link in the description if you want to get these sounds yourself. They'll work with the Roland Cloud VST and hardware versions of the D-50. Walter confirms that all cards only have SysX, no PCM data on them. Cheers, guys. That high texture is magic shit. Yeah. So what I wanted to do, I was inspired by the famous digital native dance preset using the PCM samples in an unpredictable way. So let's isolate just those samples. Let's see if we have just the synth here. We have just the samples, which is perfect. So you can hear them. We're able to hear them. One thing is, I'm pretty sure I'm not using key follow all the way. So you can adjust the, I'm on the wrong thing here. You can adjust the key follow amounts here. I don't know how well you guys can see this, but what you can do is at 1, the keys follow the keyboard like normal. So if you press a C, you get a C, an octave up, you get C, an octave up, right? But you can set that to different ratios. And for the samples, that's particularly useful because you don't always, these samples are so short and they don't really sound good octaves up. So a lot of the times, just for the attack, especially if it's atonal, it's good to not use a lot of key follow. That way it retains its character across the whole keyboard. Maybe even a key follow of 0, so the sample's just always the same. I use that technique sometimes. In this case, though, I'm using some amount of that. I'm going to just reload the patch here real quick and reset that. The big thing that's happening here is I'm going to mute these partials and adjust the coarse pitch, and you'll hear these transform if I bring it all the way down and probably the volume all the way up. That's actually what we're listening to. So if I just pick one, that's the loop. And then if I pick the other one, yeah, it's pretty similar. Might be some slight differences. So that's the loop. But what's interesting about it is that when you crank it up really high, we start getting this sort of rain stick type thing, which is what I was going for. Something like that. Now in this case, that's really loud and annoying, but if I just reload the patch here, you can hear... That's how I created that little high texture at the top there. I appreciate it, Synth Theory. Hashtag Tink. It's a lot of fun to come up with different ways to attack the problem of synthesis. And what I love about vintage synthesizers is none of them are like Serum or Omnisphere where they can do anything. You always have to play that game of like, how am I going to attack this problem with this synth? So I wanted to create a rain stick oriented sound, and there was no way to do that except taking like sort of a drum loopy type thing and pitching it up really high, and that ended up working. That's awesome, Mark. This one's called Nylon Shadow Play, and not to toot my own horn here, I believe this is only using 2 partials, and I was just impressed. I wouldn't say this is a realistic sound, but I was surprised by how good of a nylon acoustic guitar, classical guitar type sound I could get out of the D-50. Really velocity responsive. Really get some slap on there. And there is aftertouch on this patch, even though there's no way to do aftertouch on an acoustic guitar. There is that layer of synthesis in there. And yeah, I believe I'm just using a pretty filtered pulse width wave, and there's a little bit of vibrato, delayed vibrato coming in, so you can hear that every time you play a note, it's perfectly clean. If I hold a note, we start getting that vibrato in, and in fact, if I play a chord now, it will have that vibrato. You can hear it. And one of the things about the LFO too, it's not as relevant on this patch, but it's worth knowing, is you can sync the LFO. So you have this sync parameter here, and so you can sync it to a couple of different modes, but the main ones are where you can sync it to any note being played or the first note in a chord being played, which is super cool. Matt Wright says, a few of these samples remind me of some similar sounds in the M1, but the D-50 seems more exotic overall. Well, some of that is definitely the sound designers at Roland. Eric Persing and Adrian Scott made all of the factory patches for the D-50, and there's a video where Eric Persing describes like taking a nail file and throwing it down the hall and then sampling that and taking that waveform that he got and looping it to create some of the spectral waves that are in the synthesizer. And then, of course, this synth also popularized some samples like the Shakuhachi, or however the hell you say that word. Let's see. Ingolf says, often certain little textures in the background will make a sound so interesting. Yeah, and that's what I was going for. Now, this is a really cool one and uses the 4 LFOs you have per voice. So if you think about it, you've got LFO 1 and LFO 2 and LFO 3. Sorry, 6 LFOs per voice. And I'm using all of these, but you've got an upper and a lower tone. And since this is a dual patch, meaning you only have 8 voices, it uses all of the D-50's power to create a voice like this. What we're listening to is many sawtooth LFOs, but with different rates. So you sort of get this granular cloud of sound. This is Voight Kampff test. And again, this one's very responsive to aftertouch. These wonderful distorted grains. To me, that's a sound that's only accomplishable with the Roland D-50, and also hopefully an example of a sound that shows that the D-50 doesn't have to sound like just vintage retro old patches that we've all heard before. Thank you very much, Dub. I appreciate it. I think that the D-50 can sound really awesome. I don't know if I'd say it sounds modern, but it doesn't have to sound dated, let me say it that way. You can make really cool new patches, and there's so much more that can be done with the D-50 than I think 99% of people realize. And without a doubt, though, Matt, the M1 can do more. It has more samples and stuff like that. But there's something about the magic of the limitations, like the sound designers at Roland just really hit this perfect sweet spot. You know, if there had been 1,000 samples in the D-50 instead of 100, it wouldn't be as good, because these are the perfect 100. I wish there was a slightly better vocal sample. Here is a piano sound. It's very good. It's a piano sound. You can hear how gritty and disgusting in a good way it gets at the low end. Very low fidelity. Really beautiful reverb sound. It's one of those things, though. It'll drive you crazy when you're making patches, the lack of fidelity in the reverb, but once it all comes together, you don't really notice it. Aftertouch on that. Of course, pianos don't have aftertouch. By the way, guys, this is the first, 8 patches of the whole library? We have so many cool patches here, and it's a lot of fun. Alan says, your husband brings home a calendar filled with graphic images of Volcas and hangs it on the wall. What do you do? The little notes in the patch say tortoise or turtles. Not a difference. This one is called Water Temple. I'll fly through some of these because I made some of these patches live on stream, the next 20 or so. If you want to watch how I made these patches, links in the description to the D-50 sound design playlist. Something I rarely do is actually use the pitch bender, but in a lot of these patches, I should have been doing this earlier, but the partials are not all controlled by the pitch bender necessarily. In this case, it sounds like they are. We'll come across a couple, though, where it will only be affecting 2 of the 4 partials or something like that. That's really beautiful for making 7th chord type stuff. This one's called Solpaveda Seawall, which is a title from Blade Runner 2049 and sort of the sister patch to the Voight Kampf patch we heard before. So same sort of granular thing, but in a different direction. Notes. So again, using a shitload of different LFOs to create these sounds, and actually a decent amount of resonance to give it that sort of gritty texture to it. Just huge space and really characterful. You know, these are the types of sounds you can get with the D-50 that, in my opinion, you can't get with anything else. This one's called Source Bass. It's based off of my Moog Source right here, my favorite bass sound you can create off of this. It's filthy. And in this case, it doesn't sound analog, but the digital grittiness sort of adds something. Velocity sensitive, just nasty. If you want like a dirty re-space that's got some character, just a growl. A lot of fun. The Blade Runner one is absolutely perfect. Well, I'm so glad you think so. I tried to avoid doing Blade Runner patches, you know, stuff that's only Vangelis type sounds, but you know, Neuromancer Blues and patches like this, they don't emulate any particular sound in the Blade Runner soundtrack, but I feel like they could fit in that universe. Here's another one that's a Blade Runner reference. It's called We're Physical. Shout outs to anybody in the chat who knows what the reference, who said we're physical. We're not computers, Sebastian, we're physical. That's the hint. This is a really cool patch because it's using the sample and hold. So let's just check this one out. again, using conflicting LFO shapes so that we're getting more than we could get from your typical vintage synthesizer, which only has one LFO or something like that, to get a lot more interesting stuff. Aquatic says, that's batty, close, but no cigar, Aquatic. Let's see. I'm not going to spoil it until someone comes out with it. Roland Shearer, welcome to the stream. I never knew they made a PG for the D-50. Something special about LA Synths. Also 100% with you about CS70M over the CS80. So I just want to put this out here. I'll try to say it quickly. I very deliberately did not say that the CS70M is better than the CS80. I put out a video, said I think every way the CS70M is better than the CS80. And that might sound like splitting hairs, but that's very much what I did in the video. I showed every way that the CS70M is objectively like a feature better than the CS80. It's better to have a polyphonic sequencer than to not have a sequencer, right? That's incontrovertible. That doesn't mean it's a better synth. When you add up the sum of all of its parts, I imagine that a CS80 is still probably amazing, probably even better than the CS70M, but I thought the best way to get across how amazing the CS70M was just to really sort of do a comparison, because I think there's so many things that people don't know about the CS70M as compared to its older sibling. So that's all I'll say about that. This one's called Pop Icon Lead, which is a reference to my first album. Sounds particularly good if you add a little bit of portamento. Very modern type sound. Kind of falls apart on the lowest octave. Really fun, once again, using that gated reverb type sound. No problem, Roland Shira. I've heard patches you people wouldn't believe. I love it. This is Synthpunk Strings. I made this on stream when Synthpunk was here, and I'm glad he's okay. I believe he wanted a patch that had a lot of complex motion to it. And so it's a string patch, but it's a little bit more than that. We've got Cultured, who hangs out in the chat. This is his go-go patch. A lot of fun. Bones for Mom. Shoutouts to Vulture Mom. Did that on stream as well. Corvidae lead. This one's a very powerful sound. It could be a bass, could be a lead. A lot of power. Very digital sound. Kind of like a brass thing up top. Down here, just brutal. Shoutouts to Machine Storm, one of my favorite sounds. This is a good example of a sound where the key tracking is not being used, so it doesn't matter what note you play, it's always going to sound like this. Yeah. Alan mentions that portamento is a great way to squeeze in a little bit of pitch envelope. Yeah, you have a very flexible pitch envelope in the D-50. I'm just not that much of a pitch envelope guy. I know I should be, but that's a thing. We've got the Polaris Plux. That's what I started the stream with. Planet Scum. This is just a fun patch. That's a dedication to you guys. And you can hear some wavetables fade in at the bottom there. A fun one. I believe I made that one on stream as well. Shoutouts to Dub Station Zero, Dub's Stargate. This one's fun because you get something different every time you hit the key. So this is using some fast LFOs as well as some slow LFOs to be able to get this sort of like infinite variation thing going on where we have different sounds. Whoa, that sequence-like patch was amazing. Yeah, there's so many cool things you can do with the D-50 that really do take it almost into that wave station sort of area. Can the LFOs be key tracked on the D-50? Interesting questions. It can be key synced or sunk. I think it's synced was the past tense of the word sync on the D-50, but you can't use bias or key follow, as it's called on the D-50, with the LFOs, which is a shame because it would be cool if it adjusted pitch. I don't think you can. So don't quote me on that. I actually have to, this is what it's like living with a low IQ. I have to consult my own video on the D-50 sometimes when I'm programming it because I'll forget like some detail about it. I'm like, hey, can I do that? And I actually have to go back because that D-50 tutorial, I made sure to cover everything that's in the manual, as well as before I published it, I asked all of the D-50 user groups, is there anything I missed? And so I think it's to this day pretty much the way to go if you want to learn how to program one of these bad boys. What was the clue again, so I can give it a go? We're not computers, Sebastian, we're physical. That's the clue. This one's called Sweetie, We're Crooks. Another reference to a show from about 2000 or so. I don't know if you guys would know this. Alan Tudyk, or however you say his name. This is as close as I could get to an electric guitar patch, considering there's no distortion in the D-50. So of course it's not going to sound as amazing as Eric Persing's wailing guitar, aka the Voodoo People patch from the JD800, but for a simpleton like myself, and we do have the nice feedback trick where we get that nice harmonic that comes in, sort of like when you're playing an electric guitar and you're standing near an amp, it'll start to feed back on itself. And Aftertouch affects the bend. So that's another really cool thing that you can do. Aftertouch can affect more than just the filter pitch or amplifier volume. It can affect the oscillator pitch. So which is really fun for adding a little bit of vibrato at the top. So you can get some pretty sick tones out of that. And I think what's, again, fun is there's just a character to the way that patch works with this synth that, like, I dare you, anybody who's out there, any sound designer, I will put $100 down right now if you can recreate this patch in another synth and have it sound just like that. I don't think it's possible. Alan says Priss, right? That's correct. It is Priss. James says Serenity. That's pretty much correct. Firefly. So Alan Turk says, Sweetie, we're crooks. We'd be in jail. Like something like that. I just gotten done watching Firefly for the first time when I came up with that one. So it was fun. Roland Shira says the OB8 has key tracking on the LFO and it's such a gorgeous sound. The LFO on the Prologue, Matt Wright, if you're still here, is actually polyphonic. A lot of people don't realize that. And you can do the key tracking trick on the, if you go into the settings, you have to decouple the LFOs. They're for some reason default to monophonic, but you can do the key tracking trick on the Prologue as well. Yeah, it can scream. Can you sample it? Yeah. Mind Idiot, shout outs to Mind Idiot, one of the newest members of the channel. This is his patch. using the ring modulator as if it was FM, so you can get some really clean FM-y type bells at the top. As you move lower, that you're still good, and then it starts really kind of falling apart in a beautiful way. So here's another patch. This one's called Poly 6 PWM Brass. This is as simple as me turning on the brass patch from the Poly 6 behind me and just trying to get them as close as I could. Obviously the D-50 has reverb. Trying to get that characteristic way the ensemble in the Poly 6 sounds. I wouldn't say it sounds particularly analog, but it's a useful patch. I wanted to make sure I put a few bread and butter sounds. This one's called Dolphins on Acid, and it's basically just an acid bass sound. Which is cool. You can just hear how fucking gnarly this is at the bottom. All of that aliasing and whine you get from the low resolution of these oscillators. That just sounds so good. Here's a patch called Intimate Piano. You can hear that we're definitely dealing with some sample plus synthesis. Kind of a fun little, chamber piano type sound. Walter says, Sweetie We're Crooks is awesome with the velocity octave switching. Yeah, that's another thing too. Depending on how hard you hit the key, you get different pulse width. And you can do that with negative pulse width. So if you hit a key really hard, you get like a thin sound. Things like that can be a lot of fun. This one's called Haunted E-Piano, and it's another sort of experiment with using the samples. So this time, instead of putting the samples up really high, like with the God of the Wired rain stick type patch, this one is taking it really low. One of my favorites. Spooky. It just, takes you away from it just being a motherfucking another patch, right? Another patch here that is a bass patch. Kind of your basic slap bass. We'll just move on. Vivid Nostalgia. You can kind of get into almost like a music box territory down low. You can hear the way the velocity is affecting the synth layer more than the other. By the way, guys, this is a perfect time to ask any questions if you guys actually want me to use the PG. I realize I'm kind of just playing the patches. There's just so much fun to play. But so we can actually pull some of these apart. Classic, this one. Everybody knows that song. Chakotay's Quest. This is your Shakuhachi exotic Roland sound. Just a really huge sound, and you can hear how the samples just get super short at the top. Almost unusably so, and if I go to the bottom of the keyboard, they get super long, almost unusably so, so there's sort of a sweet spot in there. Roland says if you ran that piano sound through the tape or Chase Bliss generation loss, it would be gorgeous. Yeah, it's a really cool sort of nostalgic vintage type sound. Here's another patch. It's one of my favorites. This was my attempt at a steel acoustic guitar. Very dynamic, just like nylon shadow play. Just a crazy amount of slap on that sound. We got my friend Mighty Pinto up in the chat. How's it going, my brother? Really a fun one. This one's called Virtual Reality. I was inspired by the Jan Hammer Beyond the Mind's Eye sound. Would almost be in that CS80 brass type territory, but we have this interesting sort of noise going on, sort of like the haunted E-piano. This would be a great time to actually listen to what's going on. So let's go ahead and see if we can pull this apart here and mute. We should just be listening to the first partials. Okay, it sounds like maybe the way I did this was more like this. So this is taking a spectral loop now. We're just listening to the lower partials. We're just listening to these two. And I created this sort of sound. And you can notice, again, I'm using less than a full key tracking, so a fractional key tracking, so that the sample, you know, it's not a tonal type sound, so I don't want it to be in there. I wanted something that was kind of spooky. So then if I partial mute, and we're only listening to these guys, it's actually very nice. We could also use the joystick to do what I just did. You don't need to have a PG-1000 to isolate this. In fact, I can just demonstrate that real quick. So now we're listening to all four partials, but I can control that with the joystick live. So I can hear just the noise. And if I want to have just the brass sound, I can just put that joystick all the way up and just... Just a fun, good old patch, something that adds something in there. Definitely gotta imbibe some more. How'd the stream go? Locomotive, welcome to the stream. Where am I from? You're from Brazil, the Rio. I'm from Florida, aka hell. What's up, DJ Crystal Love? Welcome to the stream. Good to see you, my friend. Who else we got in here? Alan says, such vivid transients. The LA engine is like a sonic scalpel. It's pretty crazy what can be done with the D-50 and the LA engine. Of course, it made its way back into synths like the JD800 and later the 1080s and stuff like that. But to me, this was sort of the sweet spot. I like the JD800. I will eventually do a full tutorial series and maybe even some sounds for that. But I think the D-50, when we did the 6 Roland vintage synth shootout, I was so impressed by how the D-50 sounded. It's just incredible. Do you sell this sound? Yes, I do. If you look in the description of the video, it will have the link to these sounds for sure. And use the code Voyager, so that's capital VOYAGER, for 20% off. Forgot to mention that. Doug, welcome to the stream. I'm so glad to have helped you, Doug. That's awesome. Yes, a lot of fun. The Bog of Eternal Stench. This one's called Frozen Piano. I think it might be a piano sample. I think it's not. I think it's probably, if I go here and go to Common Select Upper and turn the reverb balance all the way down. I don't know if it's a harpsichord or something. But anyways, that sound, when you add some cool reverb, is a cool sound. It's a lot of fun. This one's called God Forgot Us. It's probably the most like patch I couldn't figure out a good name for. It's using some of the Spectrum samples and harpsichord samples to create a interesting sort of bell pad type sound. And what's interesting about it is the delay is a little louder than I would normally have it, so it almost has this like effect to it where it like the actual beginning of the sound is not as loud as the delay, which is a fun thing. Plenty of release for my boy Dub. But you can hear it really kind of go out of tune towards the bottom, which is fun. Here is another example of a patch where I'm using a lot of sawtooth waves with different LFO shapes to create what I called a granular grand piano. So in the notes here, it says no samples, just saws. So there is no PCM sample in the sound. And I wouldn't say it's a realistic piano, but you can hear what it sounds like. So. Really fun. It sounds like there's a little bit of echo in there. So yeah, a lot of fun. Aliasing in the best way, yes. Nick says, I see D20s a lot for sub 2000 in the LA area. Always been curious, heard bad things about the D70. The D20, I haven't had any experience with any of the Ds other than, you know, the Ds you can pick up on the streets here of Lake Worth. But you know, the problem is kind of like the Alpha Juno 1 to the Alpha Juno 2. You can get Alpha Juno 1s for cheaper than Juno 2s, but it's almost worth it to like get the full-fledged version. Having said that, I do think some of those synths could sound pretty good, but when I've listened to at least the patch comparisons, or not comparisons, but just listen to patches from the D20 or D70, to me, they don't quite have the D50 thing. I don't know what they cut out to make that happen. James, have a wonderful night. Locomotive asks, do you have a pack with all your D50 sounds and banks? The pack is called Neon Chronicles. It's in the description of this video. And yeah, it's just one pack and it has everything. So everything you've heard tonight is in that pack. There's not like a bunch of different packs. So it's one pack, you get everything. This one's called the Avantian Seas, reference to Scream Thy Name Betrayer, if any of y'all know what that is. This one's interesting because I'm using the ring modulator to get this sound. And the D-tune is coming from LFOs. And what's interesting about that is the way the D-tune works with the ring modulation. The wonderful sort of watery sort of sound to it. Again, a very unique sound by the way that the ring modulator works. What I don't love the ring mod in the D50. They omitted it from the JD800 actually, because I think they realized it wasn't implemented all that well. People complained and they put it back into the JD990, the rack mount version. It can't get that loud. So this is like the max volume I could get out of this patch, and it's still a little quiet compared to some of the other patches we have out there. Vanessa, I did just say that. Regal, welcome to the stream. I can get a similar sound out of the Poly 6. Yeah, so, I mean, I actually based one of the patches off of Poly 6, or two of the patches off the Poly 6, in fact. Love the Poly 6. This will not, really can't get into that analog territory, but it can get into a really wonderful, characterful, unique, one-of-a-kind vintage digital sound. This one's called Magic Theater. What is the pet? What is it? stumbled through those notes a little roughly, but that's one of my favorite pieces of music from Beyond the Mind's Eye by Jan Hammer. So I just listened to that on that little flute solo, sort of ethnic Egyptian flute solo on loop, and tried to match that perfectly, which is a lot of fun. Here's a patch, bass patch called Diodes and Rust. Just kick your teeth in bass. Oh, love that. So the D-50 can sound pretty gritty, even though it doesn't have any sort of distortion in it, because it's got this sort of gritty character to it. JD800 is going to have much more fidelity, but it has distortion in it, so that's kind of that sort of a thing. Thank you, Synth Theory. I appreciate that. Judas Priest pun? Enlighten me, Alan. It was not. Regal says instant EBM. Yes, and that was very much the goal. Eventually, I want to put out a pack just for EBM producers, because I think that would be useful to people. This one's called Damn Fine Coffee. Hopefully, you guys will catch the reference. Really big, awesome string patch. Here's one I think where the bender will do something interesting. So if I play this chord, oh no, it's not, it's just bending everything all at once. So Nick pointed out that this one could actually use a little bit more release on it. So it's really easy to do. We could just go to partial select all of them, and then time 5 on the envelopes is going to be a release. So we could just crank that up a little bit. 85 is probably more than you'd ever need, so now we've got some release. The release is almost infinite if you put it all the way up, you know. Bring that down to 80 so it's a little more reasonable. We can be real tender with it if we play quietly. Versus when we play a little harder. Tender. Thank God for that. Mike adding a little bit of random noise in there just to ruin that beautiful moment. Yeah, this is definitely probably my favorite pad in the thing. That's just like your more typical pad. It's using some interesting different samples. I'm going to bring the release down just a bit, just for the sake of demoing stuff. So if we disable, we can go through and just check out all of the different partials. So right now we're only listening to partial 1, which hopefully you guys can see that flashing. I'm not hearing anything, so I might not have used partial 1. That would be the synthesis. Let's see, 2. More or less the same. I probably just have a little bit of detune between those 2 layers, so these 2 partials together. Which sounds good, but we want to check out this. I really think it's partial, this upper partial 1 that sells the sound. This is one of the vocal looped samples, so basically a vocal wavetable. Really thin. Unfortunately, the samples in the D-50 can't be ran through the filter, so there's not like a way to do the aftertouch thing where the sample gets brighter. So you'll notice if I play this and I lean into the keyboard, nothing fucking happens because it's just not possible with the D-50. So that's kind of like maybe one of the downsides. I don't think it matters because once you hear everything together, it's funny it's only 3 partials. I would have guessed it was 4 because it's just such a huge sound. You don't miss it. I don't think anybody's going to be like, that's too small of a sound. I wish it had that. But yeah, I think to me it's that's Locomotive says it reminds me of an Emulator 2 character. Yeah, I can definitely see that. That sort of low fidelity thing. This is a patch I haven't demoed yet. This one's called Serpentine Dance. And it's an interesting one. It's a split. The lower is soloed and the upper is sort of a Sakuachi type thing. So, well, here's the sample, the loop in the bottom. It's really chaotic. Yeah, kind of a fun one. Definitely you could use just the top end and, you know, kind of get into the really interesting wonky type thing. And then down here, whichever notes you're hitting, you can hear that's pretty fast compared to going to the low C. Like punishingly slow. But sometimes the loops can sound really good down low. And if you play them both at the same time, you can just sort of get some of the energy of the high notes, but the grit of the low notes. Oh, it doesn't work on this patch because it's low solo. But we could go into key mode real quick and adjust that just to... just like a regular split, and it would be fine. I think. Whoa. We're going into the darkness, guys. Anyways, that's that patch. I need to continue to drink. So cheers to all you guys for hanging out. I appreciate everybody who's been supporting me. A lot of people have bought Neon Chronicles, which is exciting. It took me about 6 months to put all of these sounds together. Obviously not 6 months of working on it every day, but it was a labor of love. All of these sounds are my babies, and I wanted to make sure I did a live stream where we could talk a bit more about how I made some of them, as well as actually let everybody hear all of them. Because in my demo video, I only covered about half of them. So anyways, cheers to all you guys. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being beautiful on the inside and out. And can I get some scum cheers in the chat? Yes. Walter says, damn fine coffee is really good, Alex. I'm auditioning them side by side. I missed how good it was when I got the pack. Thank you very much, Aquatic. I appreciate it. And Walter, thank you very much. It's definitely, that one was like, it sort of surprised me how good it ended up. It's a subtle patch. I could see how you can miss it because it's not necessarily, you know, God's most innovative patch, right? It's kind of like another string pad, but I wouldn't even take credit for this. It just worked out that it ended up being one of my favorite patches that I've heard of that type, that like deep string sound. I thought it was very cool. Vanessa says, make your machine say Vanessa. I couldn't even get it to say Machine Storm. Unfortunately, there's no vocoder or anything like that. This one's called Tachikoma Ghosts, which is another reference, cyberpunk reference for anybody who's deep, into the solid state society. This is a really fun one. I'm going to go to Common Select up here. See how it's red is patch? So total volumes here, I'm just going to turn this up a bit. I think I turned this one down a bit. You don't want it to get too loud, but... What's going on in this patch too, by the way, is we're actually listening to the tremolo sound of the D-50. So we have a bunch of different chorus modes. Why don't we check out some of those actually? But we can use chorus, flanger, tremolos, and combinations thereof to actually get different sounds. In this case, I'm using the tremolo on top of this sort of clean Stratocaster sound. Just gorgeous. It's got a more squishy sort of velocity response. And I think it just sounds really cool. It can still sound pretty sharp. But anyways, let's check out some of the different chorus modes real quick while we're here, because it's one of those things I don't think everybody realizes. I do cover it in the tutorial. The first two chorus modes are just chorus. You can hear that that's pretty extreme because the depth was cranked all the way up. So I'm going to just turn the depth down a bit, but the rate kind of in the middle. I'll put these at approximately both like 50%, let's say. So this is that same electric guitar sound. I'll turn the balance all the way off real quick. So here's the electric guitar sound dry. I'm going to turn the reverb down too for this example. So you can hear a little bit of whine in there. If I increase the chorus, you can hear how stereo it becomes quickly. And something worth saying here is I think chorus 1 and 2 are based off of the chorus 1 and 2 of the Juno 106. I can't guarantee that. I'm not sure that that's exactly what it is, but you can kind of think of that because chorus 2 has a little bit more speed and depth to it. If we keep going here, we move into some of the chorus flanger stuff. We increase the rate and depth we can get. You can hear a little bit of a little scratchy cable going on in my right ear. It's annoying. There we go. Moving on, well, that didn't seem to fix it actually. We got another chorus, or another... You can hear this one's very vibrato-y. Which is great because the PCM samples, there's no way to do vibrato. So this is like a way you can kind of fix that. There's no way to do amplitude modulation on the samples. So moving into types 5 and 6, I believe, are the tremolos. But turn the depth all the way up so we can hear it. Oh, this is something else. Yeah, so 6 is the tremolo. That's what we started with. Then we actually have chorus and tremolo, which can be a little extreme because to get the full range of the tremolo, we also get kind of too much, but a little bit of both is kind of nice. So what that is the same chorus LFOs affecting the tremolo as well. And then actually one of the coolest ones is the last chorus type, which is based off of the Dimension D. So this is a chorus that has multi-taps in it, or a bunch of bucket brigade. And the goal of the rack mount Dimension D chorus, analog chorus from Roland in the 80s, was to create a stereo widener. So unlike a lot of choruses that add lushness and you can really hear the chorus sound, the idea behind the Dimension D and what made it one of the most coveted pieces of gear from the 80s is that it just tried to make the sound wider without affecting the character too much. So here's how this sounds. And you can hear that that's very much what's going on. I can increase the depth a bit. And you get a little bit up at 80%. If I pull that all the way out, you can hear how dry and mono it sounds. Versus if I put that in. So it's one of those things where you don't even really notice it until it's gone, sort of a thing. Mighty Pinto asks, do I have any spooky plans for Halloween? I do not. I am fucking just covering some shifts at Harry's and shit like that. Getting lots of stream noise. Yeah, so for whatever reason, one of my cables started to just make a lot of noise, and then this microphone's making noise. It's definitely the stream of noise happening. Give everything a little jiggle again. I think we're good. Except on the mic. Not a lot I can do about that. So yeah, definitely a thing. Anyways, let's keep going. This is an interesting one, sort of the inverse of some of the sounds. This one's called a digital ocean. And in the notes here, it says all loops, no synths. So, really unnatural space. And then if you hold the notes, you get a big release. But if you take your hands off, you get that like super unnatural, just like metallic suck out sound. So let's pull this one apart too while we're here. So if I just turn the reverb all the way off, you can hear, you can start to hear how it is just a bunch of loops. So I'm going to turn everything off except for partial 1. Oh, you can really hear this loop here. Yeah, down on this octave, you can hear that it's actually a couple of violins and then some synth notes. Interesting, right? So I'm going to mute that one. Partial 2 is an octave up. Or 2 octaves up. Partial 3. The same, probably a little detune. So we basically have 3 octaves of the same loop, and when you stack them all together, you get this sound. Like this big chaotic sound, and then you add the reverb in, and then you've got basically just a good way to experiment with not using any of the built-in synth stuff, because I found I was using the synth a whole lot and then just adding a little bit of some samples in here. Regal says that needed side chaining. Yeah, I agreed. I'm glad to hear that everything's sounding okay, so that's good. Glad to hear. So this one's called Aquatic Ambiance. A big shout out to David Wise, who the fact that he's watched this channel even once makes me cry sometimes. Obviously inspired by Aquatic Ambiance, the incredible track created for the original Donkey Kong Country soundtrack, which I have an original version of that over here. I've got the Japanese release of Donkey Kong Country right here. Want to make sure I had one of these just in case David Wise ever stops by the stream, because his music impacted me so much. So let's pull this one apart too and see what's going on here. This is another really cool one as far as I'm concerned, as far as like cool thing. So we're listening just to partial 1 right now, and you can hear actually, depending on how hard I hit the note, we get different pulse width, right? So if I hit it really hard, you can hear it's thin. Well, if I hit it hard, good. If I hit it hard quietly, we get a thicker sound, right? So that's the velocity is affecting the pulse width of the square wave. Let's disable that and add partial 2. What do we have here? An octave up. What's partial 3? You'll notice this is partial 3 now. That's a 5th an octave up. And then this is, I believe, a 7th. It could be, let's see if it is. My relative hearing is not the perfect thing. So let's go back to here and go. Oh, I see. So it's actually a 2nd. So it's what is that? An 11th chord. So what we have, just listening to it with only one partial, we've got the 1, an octave up, a 5th, and a 2nd, right? So that's the part that gives it a little bit of interest, is this chord. So when you press just one note, you're hearing all 4 of these notes. But they're at relative volumes. So instead of it feeling like you have an auto chord thing where you're always getting, in this case, it would be a suspended 2nd chord, right? Instead of that, what you're actually hearing, because they step down in volume like harmonics, we're listening to the harmonic series. So when I turn these all on and I press that same note, you're hearing all of those notes, but it fills in a more gentle way, as opposed to being a sound that, again, it doesn't really sound like a suspended 2nd. It sounds like you're getting the harmonics, and not just that, but they fade in sequence. So instead of it being like they kind of all fade in at once, first you get the low note, then you get the octave up, then you get the 5th, then you get the 9th note. And that 9th note is very subtle. Hey, Gingy, how's it going? And of course we have aftertouch on that. Now what that does is, once I go from playing one note at a time, if I play a 5th note, now we get a really complex chord. Because we're getting in, what is that? We're getting an interesting note in there. Like a 6th in there. A natural 6th. And if I play a 3rd, we're going to, that 3rd will, the 5th of a 3rd is like a 7th, is basically the way you could think of it. So it's like an automatic 7th chord. So I'm just playing the 1, 3, and 5 minor chord, C minor, and you'll hear that it has a minor 7th, add 9 sort of flavor to it. Wrong chord, that's a C major. C minor. We get these really awesome harmonics. Sometimes those harmonic notes are going to be out of key, but it doesn't really matter because they're so pulled back. I'm stoked you made it too, Gingy. So it's a fun way to basically add some really interesting chords that have a little bit more going on to them than just your typical string patch, right? So So yeah, here's another David Wise inspired patch. This one from Donkey Kong Country 2. This one's called Hornet Hole. And what it's actually based off of is a wave station patch. And it's a low Stratocaster thing. And so we've got a lot of delay in here. And I think the original patch was probably inspired by Edge from U2. So he's very famous for doing these sort of staccato Stratocaster type sounds. Edge from U2, right? Where the Streets Have No Name and all of that. Lemon is here. Oh, she's leaving. Blind Cat Lemon. And so it's one of those things where this patch is probably, again, it's like the original patch from the Wave Station was probably inspired by Edge, and then it was used by David Wise in Donkey Kong Country, and then in my own stupid little humble way, I'm trying to do a patch like that on the D-50. Then we move on to the Siren Choir, which again was like the closest I could get to sort of like a Fairlight vocal. What's interesting about this one is I actually built into this patch if I go to partial select 1, I should be able to turn it up. No, it's not that one. Partial 2, partial 3, partial 4. There it is. So I actually programmed into the patch a noise layer. And so that's there. You can turn it up if you want, but I ended up turning it down because boosting the EQ added so much noise to the sound. I just wanted like a little noise at the top. But that EQ catches the sort of gritty vintage digital character at the top end of the synth that's so gorgeous. And so I found I didn't really need to add any noise. But if anybody buys Neon Chronicles, they can add just a little, even just a little bit. Can add something to it. This is with noise. Yeah, so kind of just like a little thing. We've got a nice slap bass sound called Not Sponge Worthy. That's a thing. We've all heard some of those types of things before. Let me finish off this beer real quick. What do you guys think so far? I think Neon Chronicles is not half bad, and I think the D-50 sounds incredible, and it was a fun journey to create all of these sounds. So I hope you guys are enjoying them, and I hope for all of you guys out there who have D-50s or the Roland Cloud that you'll go ahead and try these patches out for yourself. That would be awesome. I appreciate it, Jinji. Regal says, would you ever do a Discord server for sharing samples and patches, or do a viewer sample and patch night? Oh, that's actually a great idea. I'd love to do like a viewer sample and patch night. Gingy asks, does the D20 hold a candle to the D50? For me, hey, I appreciate it, Doug and Alan. We were talking about it a little earlier, right before you got here, Gingy. I don't know that I can recommend it just because I've never had one. It's a simpler synth. For me, the D50 is the perfect combination of complex and simple that you can get all of these wonderful sounds out of it. It's just limited enough. The D20 might be too limited for me. I don't know. They do make, I think it's the PG-10 programmer for the D20, so you can do some stuff like this. Has its own editor. I mean, I'd give it a shot if I ever got a chance to get one, especially locally. I'd love to check it out and see how it compares. That would be a fun stream. If you listen to the soundtrack and Fantasia patches on the D20 versus the D50, which those are just two patches, but they're like the two most iconic patches of the D50. I don't think they sound anything as awesome as they do on the D50 on the D20. So that's probably the biggest reason I have maybe a little bias against the D20 is just I'm like, those patches didn't sound that good. Now, they might not have been programmed the same way. It might have been programmer differences as opposed to the synthesis, right? But for me, I was like, it just doesn't have that sound. It doesn't have what I need. Other than the lack of organ sounds, this patch bank is amazing. Yes. The price difference is big. Well, you can get a lot of D50s for around $600. So it's kind of one of those things where I think like an ESQ1 and the DW6000 are both really cool synths that have something that you don't necessarily need an SQ80 or a DW8000 to enjoy. I think an Alpha Juno 1, I'd be like, just get the Alpha Juno 2. It's probably like $200 more, and it's going to give you that velocity and aftertouch and the extra octave of keys. It's worth it. For me, I again, speaking ignorantly as someone who's never had a D20 in the studio, I'm like, it's probably worth it just to go for the D50 if I'm being honest. That would be my guess. I can't validate that. I know the D20 cult is going to light my ass up in the comments. Come for me. Come at me, bro. I'll take it. I'd love to be wrong. It's definitely a thing. Walter says, I'm slightly attracted to the workstation aspect of the D20. The D10, 110, 5 don't do anything for me. I'm D20 curious. Is there a D20 cult? I bet there is. This one's called Ancient Wisdom. Little aftertouch in there, just a nice sort of fluty type thing. We are up to Deet Dreams of Day. If anybody knows who Deet is, I'll send you a free copy of Neon Chronicles. It's a reference to a thing that started in the 80s and then had a Netflix revival. That's all I'll say about that. One of my favorite patches, very similar to Damn Fine Coffee, but with this beautiful PCM attack thing on top. Yeah, so it's kind of taking the core of what was going on with Damn Fine Coffee. But if we go into the partial mutes here, and let's go pull this apart. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so the second partials here, so I don't know if you guys see this, is partials 2 of both of these are the synth layers. We're going to mute those and listen to just the first partials of each layer. And now we can hear that we have 2 different PCM samples. Let's do them one at a time, actually. So let's just start with the first one here. This one is this... I think it's a piano sample. Yeah, I think it's a piano sample, but up high it... got this wonderful sort of sound, especially with the delay. So you can, in the reverb section, you can use reverbs or delay. And I think with delay with this, you just get... This is beautiful sound. And then over here, we also have this layer is, I think, a vocal sample. Also just gorgeous. And what's interesting is, even though it's feeding into the same delay because it's a smoother sound, you don't really hear the delay. It just sounds like reverb. You can kind of hear it when I play chords, and then just all together with the synth layers, it's just... Yeah, just, you know, you can't teach what I've got. That's what I'm trying to say. Let's catch up here with the chat for a second. Machine Storm says, not sure why, but I get Twin Peaks vibes. That's because I love Twin Peaks, and a lot of these sounds, the Damn Fine Coffee patch is a reference to Twin Peaks. So, yes, love. I listened to about 3 hours of Badalamenti earlier this week. I was learning one of the tracks from Twin Peaks Season 3 today, actually, earlier. Windswept Reprise by Johnny Jewel. This one's called, let me see how I can pronounce this, beta-phenethylamine. Beta-phenethylamine. You know the reference there. You are deep. Again, another cyberpunk reference. This is a similar patch to Dub Station Zero's Dub Stargate patch, where we've got a built-in chord, but this is a suspended second and is a more chaotic, anxious, sort of like Jonesing for It type patch. Played down low, you can get some really cool. Really nice, actually. Again, I was just trying to come up with stuff that was a little bit different, and that could be the basis of a track. It's not as playable for playing melodies and things, but as far as coming up with something, a lot of fun. Ogra's Ori, sorry. Here's like kind of a more choiry version. Gingy was asking for a more choir thing, so. Kind of a faster decay where it kind of gets out of there. Kind of halfway between a bell pad and a vocal pad type of a sound. A lot of fun to play. Population 51201. Hopefully you guys catch the reference there. What is it? How do you play the notes here? Speaking of Twin Peaks, this was me listening to the Twin Peaks soundtrack and trying to really kind of nail that sound. And what's interesting about it, let's go ahead and pull apart the partials real quick. So we're going to just listen to... Let's listen to just the first partials. Okay, so this is worth checking out. So listening to only the first partials, you can hear that what I started with is actually like a Rhodes sample. Just this little glinty thing. It's very small. You can barely hear it. The fucking cable is going crazy. Right? But when I listen to... Sorry, partial select, and we're just listening to the synth layers now. what does that sound like? It doesn't sound like a square wave or a sawtooth wave. And what's actually going on is I'm using a lot of resonance to create a sort of pseudo sine wave. And in this case, when I was listening to the original DX7 patch, I heard that it has a little bit of, modulator in there. So it's not just a pure sine wave. So you're sort of getting like that first harmonic or so on the original DX7 patch that they used. And so to emulate that, I have the resonance not tuned to the note, but kind of above it. And just to prove this point, I can increase the cutoff frequency. And you can hear that we're back to like a sawtooth wave, but if I bring this down, it's actually an organ sound, isn't it, Dub? Right? The key tracking is all the way up, too, so that way it follows the notes. So it's kind of an organ-type sound as the basis as far as the synthesis goes, and then you just add in that sample, which is kind of cool. Couple more patches here. Another Donkey Kong inspired patch. This one's called In a Snowbound Land. Using a bunch of samples. All of those spectral loops that are built in there. So, been a while since I've listened to the Cocktail Twins. I do not know how to pronounce that word, aquatic, but I know the band. Love their early stuff. I need to go back and listen to them too. Here's just a really simple piano sound. Simple in... And this was actually an experiment for me in bias, because the D-50 can't actually use one sample of a piano that stretches well across the whole 6-octave keyboard. So we go in and we start pulling this one apart. So we're just listening to the lowest octave here. You can hear that I've used bias, so if I'm above C3, you don't even hear anything. So I'm hitting C4 right now. I'll prove it to you. And you can't hear anything. So just in the low 3 octaves, we've got the first sample. Because you can hear it's already getting too short by the time we get there. Partial 2 is in the middle. And I think I kind of use that across the whole key bed here. Partial select for the third one, I think will only be the high. That way we can get all the way up there. And then the last one is a synthesizer layer. So this is sort of a narrow pulse width, which sort of sounds closer to a piano. So we could get a little aftertouch. Kind of reminds me of, with the pulse width modulation on there, like almost an Oberheim type sound to it, actually. And then everything all together. And I think it's a pretty seamless transition using bias to be able to more or less mask out the stuff that I don't want, where you transition from one set of samples to a different set over the course of the key bed. So that's, again, a way that you can do that type of thing on this synth. Let's see. Elizabeth Fraser did amazing stuff for the Mortal Coil, or this Mortal Coil as well. Definitely need to check that out. We're running towards the end of the patches, so this was sort of like an all-out fuckfest of a patch. Almost sort of soundtracky in the sense that the decay is immediate from the filter with a lot of resonance, but there's a soft attack on the amplifier. And that's not the cable crackling. There is actually a PCM sample loop layer fading in at the end there. Really subtle. So let's see if we can pull that out of there. So we're listening just to layer 1. That's it. So it's this little weird texture that's layered into the rest of the sound. Yeah, just again, it's one of those patches. It's just like a shitload of fun to play. Anytime I'm touching Depeche Mode territory, that is a good thing. Gingy. This one's called Poly 6 Signs. It's based off of the sine wave sounding E-piano patch from the Poly 6 over there. Little bit of amplitude modulation being routed to the from the LFO to the amplifier. And you get these little interesting sounds to it. So if I go into partial select here and I just increase this, you can hear see they're all at 40 right now. And that's what I've done is I've tuned the filter to the pitch of the note. If I increase this at all, you can hear it gets crazy because of the resonance. But down here, we get just these wonderful sine wave type sounds. So that's a way that even though there isn't a sine wave built into the D-50, there's no sine wave waveform, just using a crazy amount of resonance on a sawtooth wave, a la the Poly 6. That's how they did it over there, which is a lot of fun. Yeah, it's just a cool patch. Saturn Analog, I think I introduced my first live stream on the D-50 with this, using LFOs. This works, I tuned it so that it works at 128 BPM, so... To me, that's like the closest to sounding actually analog on this synth. I don't remember how much resonance I used, but I think it just has something like I could be convinced on that one. It's because the D-50 can sound so fat and warm, unlike so many other digital synths from this era. This one's called JP8000 Pad. It's sort of an organ pad. Who needs an M1? So fuck an M1, I got this. So that's your famous sort of organ-based sound from the M1. But it just sounds fucking massive because the D-50 you can use 4 partials, and the original organ bass is made with a square wave and a triangle wave that wasn't possible on this synth. So I use the same trick from the Poly 6. So if you know a little bit about the additive harmonics of waveforms, you'll know that a square wave and a triangle wave has essentially the same harmonics. The triangle wave just has less of them. So by filtering down the square wave, you can sort of get that triangle square thing, and it just sounds fucking huge. Yeah, just a really great one. And it's got the reverb on it. It would be as simple as going to here and pulling the reverb bounds down if you want to try. If you don't want any release, it's as simple as selecting all of the partials and bringing down T5 on the amplifier, and now you could have it be super just aggressive and bitey. So for sure, a lot of fun here. Machine Storm says Saw is the most overrated waveform. Triangle is the most underrated. Uh, Walter says, you did make a lot of organ sounds in disguise. Yes, I do like organ sounds when they're not just obviously organy. This one's called Before Wave State. This was the last patch I made on the 3-hour tutorial of the D-50, but it's here in case you want it. So this is using a loop on the low end here. And again, the aftertouch is routed to bend the note up. And is using the ring modulator. So that's an example of where you're getting that interesting distortion from. K3 brass, based off of my favorite brass preset from the Kawai K3, but with a little bit of pitch envelope on it. This is like your cheesy 80s brass sound. Little bit of interesting LFO movement in there. Of course, we got this one. What is it? Been a while since I played this. Yeah, so there's that sound. And then finally, the last patch in the library, Neon Chronicles, maybe my favorite. If we listen to just the left hand, it's a split. We've got the lowest notes are set up so that you can pick whatever key you want to be in. So C1 is the synth. Wow, that resonance. So cool. And we also have a sawtooth LFO affecting the filter, so you sort of get a pluck thing. Oh, it just sounds so good. I can't believe, I mean, it's not analog, but I've never heard a synth sound so good that's not analog, in my opinion, humble opinion. So that's C1. B0 all the way down to C0 is going to be the loop. Now, if you play it at G sharp, that's going to be the exact same notes from Jean-Marc Aujar's Revolution, the intro. So that famous record starts with this loop from the D-50. Technically, it uses 3 octaves, and I could only do 2 because the structure, I wanted to do a split, and there was no way for me to add that final octave, the 3rd octave in, because you can't pick 3 of the partials and have that be on the split. It's got to be the low 2 and the high 2 or nothing. So technically, if you want to reproduce that sound, you need just 1 more octave of that. And he sort of did this little flam thing at the top because he's a genius. But anyway, so that's that note at G sharp, but you can pick any note. So if you want to play an F, for instance, but the time will be different because depending on where you play, C, really slow. Really slow. I tuned this one so it sounds really good at G sharp because that's the nature of, you know, that's the way that patch was. So here's how this sounds. Yeah, just incredible and such a wonderfully nostalgic way to finish off the library. For me, it was a lot of fun to do, and I hope you guys enjoyed checking out these sounds. Like, I put a lot of effort into all of them. Neon Chronicles, this last sound took me an entire day to do. So for me, it's been a lot of fun to have this opportunity to check these out with you guys. And yeah, I don't know. I hope that some of the people watching this stream, I know a lot of you guys have already bought the library, and for those of you who have, thank you so much. I'm literally just one dude out here trying to make it in these dark streets. And it's just been so much fun, and I love the D-50. I mean, that's really the takeaway. And I love vintage digital synths. I wish more people would go out and get some vintage digital stuff, because that is worth it. And I think that they're kind of overrated. Everybody loves the vintage analog stuff, and the vintage analog stuff commands such a high price. But you can get a D-50 for cheaper than you can get a DeepMind 12, for instance, and I think it's really great. Thank you very much, Alan. Billy, welcome to the stream. How's it going? I appreciate it. So if you're watching this video and you're not watching it live, the trick to getting these sounds 20% off is using the code Voyager, all caps. The link's in the description. It will probably be the pinned comment in this video as well. Walter says, no, let's keep these vintage digital cheap for a few more years. This is the time to get them, because I think they are going to be going up in price. I think we're going to be seeing more vintage digital relative to the whole synth market increasing in price as people move away from just thinking of vintage synths of being like the CS80 and Prophet 5 and Oberheim OBX and Mini Moog, and they start expanding as some of these synths enter more popular consciousness. I think the D-50 and synths like it are going to go up in price, so it's not a bad time to get them. Right now, the vintage synth market, the prices are the lowest it's been in years, and I think the prices are only going to go up from here, so this is a great time. I'm grateful for you, Gingy. I'm grateful for everybody who hangs out every Wednesday night at 9. If you're just tuning in now, that's a thing we do on this channel. Every Wednesday at 9, we do something synth related, and it's an awesome community. I appreciate it, Gingy. A really great thing you can do is become a member of the channel, because it's $5 a month, but you get 50% off of everything and some of the stuff for free. And that's in the section, which, by the way, why don't I take a second here real quick? I want to shout out all of the amazing people who are members of this channel. We've had some new people join recently, so let me just pull this up real quick. I should have had this up before. Let me go look at all of my beautiful members who are here, and I just want to shout out everybody, because there's so many people who support me and this channel, and you guys are great. So shout outs to Autumn, Anna, Nikki, Dub Station, Motherfucking Zero, Andy Fields, Vulture Mom, Aquatic, Borealis, and Tony Argo for being gold level cultists, part of the Vulture culture. We also have Douglas, Ambient Knots, Nathan, Ty at the silver level, and then Johnny, Mind Idiot, and Parbs being our newest members at the bronze level. I appreciate all of you guys so much for being members of this channel. And next week we'll be back Wednesday at 9. I hope everybody's good. Somebody buy my Akai AX60, an incredible synthesizer. I've covered it many times on this channel. One of my favorite synths. It's this one right here. It's gorgeous in gold. Just an amazing things. Vanessa says, do me a total favor and say I love Pajog and Noggin. There you go. Sven, welcome to the stream. I'm so sorry it's over. But it'll be up and it'll be a lot of fun. So you guys are incredible. Crystal Love, thank you so much. Alan, thank you so much. Vanessa, everybody who's been here tonight. Machine Storm, just said something about Unify. I just missed it. But that's definitely a thing we need to talk about at some point too. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Love and light, bitches. I'm out.